Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Today inshallah we will talk about spinal cord. The spinal cord is roughly cylindrical in shape. See here in this diagram. This is roughly cylindrical in shape. It begins superiorly at the foramen magnum in the skull, where it is continuous with the medulla oblongata. See here in this diagram, this is medulla oblongata. This is the level of the foramen magnum, and here this is continuous with the spinal cord. And it terminates inferiorly in the adult at the level of the lower border of first lumbar vertebra. See here, this is L1 and this is the lower border of the first lumbar vertebra. In adults, the spinal cord ends at this level. This level is very important. You have to learn the lower border of first lumbar vertebra. In the young child, it is relatively longer and usually ends at the upper border of the third lumbar vertebra. You have to remember upper border of L3. Thus it occupies the upper two-thirds of the vertebral canal of the vertebral column, and it is surrounded by three meninges. Meninges are the protective coverings of the brain and the spinal cord, and the spinal meninges also includes dura mater, arachnoid mater and the pia mater. Further protection is provided by the CSF, which surrounds the spinal cord in the subarachnoid space. See here in this diagram, there are two enlargements of the spinal cord. This is named as cervical enlargement and this is lumbar enlargement. Now what is enlargement? In the cervical region where it gives origin to the brachial plexus, and in the lower thoracic and the lumbar region where it gives origin to the lumbosacral plexus, the spinal cord is fusiformly enlarged, and these enlargements are named as cervical enlargement and the lumbar enlargement. Inferiorly, the spinal cord tapers off into a cone-like shape and it is named as conus medullaris. And from the conus medullaris, there is a prolongation of the pia mater, which is the third meninges or the inner meninges. There is one prolongation from the conus medullaris from this pia mater, and this prolongation is named as filum terminale. It is a thread-like structure. It is filum terminale, and this filum is attached to the posterior surface of the coccyx. So you have to learn that pia mater will give origin to the filum terminale, and the filum terminale will be attached to the posterior surface of the coccyx. See here in this diagram, this is medulla oblongata. This is the level of the foramen magnum, and here it is continuous with the spinal cord. This is spinal cord, this is conus medullaris, and the spinal cord is ending at the level of the L1. This is first lumbar vertebra, and here the spinal cord will end, but the dura sheath or dura mater and the arachnoid mater and the pia mater, they will be continuous up till S2. See here, this is the level of S2 or second sacral vertebra, but the pia mater will be prolonged as filum terminale and it will be attached to the posterior surface of the coccyx. This is the anterior surface of the spinal cord and this is the posterior surface of the spinal cord. On the anterior surface there is one anterior fissure. See here, this is named as anterior median fissure. On the posterior surface there is one posterior median sulcus. So these are the structures which we have to remember. Now if we take a section of the spinal cord possesses a deep longitudinal fissure on the anterior surface, and it is named as anterior median fissure or ventral median fissure. Ventral or anterior are same, median it is in the middle, and it is a fissure because it is a deep longitudinal fissure in the midline anteriorly, and there is a shallow groove or shallow furrow which is named as posterior median sulcus on the posterior surface. It will be named as, on the anterior side it is named as fissure, and on the posterior side it is named as groove or sulcus. Along the entire length of the spinal cord, there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves which are attached by the anterior or motor root and posterior or sensory root. Always remember that the anterior roots are efferent or motor and the posterior roots are sensory or afferent. Each root is attached to the cord by a series of rootlets which extend the whole length of the corresponding segment of the cord. Each posterior nerve root possesses possess a ganglion. There will be a posterior root ganglion which is present, which is also named as dorsal root ganglion, the cells of which give rise to peripheral and the central nerve fibers. Now we will discuss the internal structure of the spinal cord. The spinal cord is composed of an inner core of the gray matter. See here in this diagram, this is gray matter. It is surrounded by outer covering of the white matter. In the spinal cord, as contrast to the brain, the gray matter is present inside and the white matter is present outside. The grey matter is H-shaped. Actually, the grey matter is the collection of the cell bodies in the central nervous system, and the white matter is the collection of the axons or the nerve fibers which are present in the central nervous system. If these collection of cell bodies are present outside the central nervous system, they will be named as ganglia. Grey matter consists of nuclei in the CNS, and the grey matter outside the CNS, it consists of ganglia. So if the cell bodies are collected inside the CNS, they are named as nuclei, and if they are collected outside the CNS, then they are named as ganglia. But both nuclei and ganglia, they are the collection of cell bodies and they will form the grey matter. The white matter is the collection of axons, but the collection of axons inside the CNS, they are named as tracts. But if they are present outside the CNS, then they will be named as nerves. So you have to remember the definition of nuclei, the definition of ganglia, and the tracts and nerves. So I will repeat all four definitions for you. First of all, you should know what is grey matter and what is white matter. The grey matter is the collection of cell bodies of neurons, and the white matter consists of, or it is a collection of the nerve cell fibers, the axons of the neurons. Then what is nuclei and ganglia? If the cell bodies are collected inside the CNS or inside the central nervous system, then they are named as nuclei. If they are collected outside the central nervous system, then they are named as ganglia. Same for the tracts and the nerves. If the axon fibers or axons are collected inside the CNS, then they are named as tracts, and if they are collected outside the CNS, then they are named as nerves. Now, first of all, we will discuss the grey matter. On cross-section, the grey matter is seen as H-shaped pillar with anterior, this is H-shaped pillar with anterior grey horns or anterior grey column and the posterior grey column, and this is the lateral grey column. So H is formed of the anterior grey column, the posterior grey column and the lateral grey column. In the middle there is one small canal which is named as central canal. This is central canal. The grey matter which is anterior and posterior to the central canal, they are named as grey commissure. This is grey commissure, and out of this grey commissure, the anterior one is named as anterior grey commissure and the posterior one is named as posterior grey commissure. But the commissure which is present in the white area or the white matter, this is also commissure. If it is anterior to the central canal but it is present in the white matter, this is named as anterior white commissure, and this one is posterior white commissure. So the areas which are around the central canal, they are named as anterior and posterior commissures, and if they are present in grey, so they will be named as anterior grey commissure and posterior grey commissure, and if they are present in white, they will be named as anterior white commissure and posterior white commissure. So what we have learned, that there is H-shaped pillar and there are anterior grey horns and posterior grey horns and the lateral grey horn. Okay, the amount of grey matter which is present at any given level of the spinal cord is related to the amount of muscle innervated at that level. For example, the size of the grey matter is greatest within the cervical area and the lumbosacral enlargements of the cords, which innervate the muscles of the upper limb and the lower limb respectively. For example, see here, this is grey matter. Okay, and this grey matter, this will be more in cervical region and the lumbosacral region, because the grey matter which is present, it is showing that it is supplying the muscles. So in cervical region, the nerves, they are supplying the upper limb muscles. So in cervical region, this gray matter is more, and in the lumbar region, they are supplying the lower limb muscles. So in lumbar region, the gray matter is also more. As in other regions of the central nervous system, the gray matter of the spinal cord consists of mixture of nerve cell bodies, their processes, neuroglia, and the blood vessels. See here in this diagram, again I will describe to you. This is the section of the spinal cord. This is anterior median fissure. This is posterior median sulcus. This is the central canal. This is the commissure, gray commissure. This is white commissure. In gray commissure, this is ventral gray commissure, and this is dorsal gray commissure. And in the white commissure, this is ventral white commissure, and there will be dorsal white commissure. This is H-shaped gray matter of the spinal cord, which is present inside, and the white matter is present at the periphery. In the gray matter, this is ventral gray column or anterior gray column. This is dorsal gray column or the posterior gray column, and this is the lateral gray column. In the white area, these are named as horns or columns or funiculus. So this is posterior funiculus, this is lateral funiculus, and this is anterior funiculus. These funiculi, they are the parts of the white matter. This is white matter. So the white matter is also divided into the anterior white matter, the lateral white matter, and the posterior white matter. See here in this diagram, this is H-shaped area or gray matter. This H is more, or it is maximum in the cervical region. See here, it is more in the cervical region and in the lumbar region, because in the cervical region they will supply the upper limb muscles, and in the lumbar region it will supply the lower limb muscles. This gray matter is less in the thoracic region. Now, first of all, we will discuss some of the nerve cell groups which are present in the anterior gray column. This lecture is only about the gray matter. For the white matter, you have to see the next lecture. So, this gray matter, which is H-shaped, first of all, I will describe the anterior gray column. In the anterior gray column, there are three groups of nuclei. First of all, this is the medial group of nuclei. Then there will be, this is medial, then there will be central and lateral. Same here, this is medial group of the anterior gray column, and this is the central group, and this is the lateral group of the anterior gray column. This is anterior gray column. Then in the middle part, or in the central part, or in the lateral gray column, there are again some nuclei which are named as intermediolateral and intermedio-medial nucleus. So these are intermediate nucleus. Intermediate nucleus will be divided into two. This is medial one, so it is named as intermedio-medial, and this is lateral one, so it is named as intermedio-lateral. In the posterior gray column, you can see many nerve cell groups. First of all, the first group which you have to learn is named as substantia gelatinosa, and more distal to it, there is one nucleus which is named as posteromarginal nucleus. But remember the substantia gelatinosa. In front of the substantia gelatinosa, there is one nucleus which is named as nucleus proprius. In front of the nucleus proprius, there is one nucleus which is named as nucleus dorsalis, which is also named as Clark's column. In front of the Clark's column, there will be another nucleus which is named as visceral afferent nucleus. So, in the anterior gray column, remember three nuclei, medial, central and lateral. In the middle part or the central part or the intermediate part, remember two nuclei, one is medial, one is lateral. In the posterior gray column, remember at least four nuclei, and they are substantia gelatinosa, nucleus proprius, nucleus dorsalis, and there is one visceral afferent nucleus which is not shown in this diagram. So what we have discussed? We have discussed in the anterior gray column there are three groups. Number one is the medial group, number two is the central group, and number three is the lateral group. The medial group is present in most segments of the spinal cord. So this line is very important, that the medial group is present in the most segments of the spinal cord and it is responsible for innervating the skeletal muscles of neck and trunk, including the intercostal muscles and the abdominal muscles. In the central group, which is the smallest one, it is present in cervical region and the lumbosacral region. The medial group was present in most segments of the spinal cord, in whole of the spinal cord, but the central group is present only in the cervical region and the lumbosacral region. In the central group, we have to learn three nuclei. One is phrenic nucleus, one is accessory nucleus, and one is lumbosacral nucleus. The phrenic nucleus, which is present only in the segment C3 to C5, it will innervate the diaphragm. In the upper 5 and 6 cervical segments, there are some nuclei which are named as accessory nuclei, and they will innervate the sternocleidomastoid and the trapezius muscle, and they will form the spinal part of the accessory nerve. The lumbosacral nucleus, as the name implies, it is present in the second lumbar down to the first sacral segment, that is from L2 to S1, and it is made up of some axons which have unknown distribution. The lateral group is present in the cervical and the lumbosacral segment of the cord, and they are for the innervation of the skeletal muscles of the limbs. From the diagram, I will explain you it again. See here, we have described the anterior gray column first. In the anterior gray column, we have three groups. This is medial group of nuclei, this is central group of nuclei, and this is lateral group of nuclei. Out of these three groups, only the medial group is present in the entire spinal cord. Only the medial group is present in the entire spinal cord. The central one is present in the cervical region and the lumbosacral region, and the lateral one is also present in the lumbosacral region only. Only in the lumbosacral region. The medial group is present in the entire spinal cord, and it is for the neck and the trunk muscles. It will innervate the neck and the trunk muscles. In the central group, we have three nuclei which we have to remember. Number one is phrenic nucleus, which will be present in C3, C4 and C5 only, and it will for the innervation of the diaphragm. Number two is the accessory nucleus. The accessory nucleus will be present in C1, C2, C3, 4 and 5, and it will form the spinal root of the accessory nerve, which is the 11th cranial nerve, and it will supply two muscles which are sternocleidomastoid and the trapezius muscle. In the central group, there will be one nuclei which are named as lumbosacral nucleus. The lumbosacral nucleus, as the name shows, is present only in the lumbar and the sacral region, and it will be for the unknown distribution. In the lateral group, see here, this is the lateral group of the nuclei which are present in the anterior gray column. They are also present in the lumbosacral region, and they are for the, this is in the lumbosacral region and cervical region also. In the cervical region, they will supply the upper limb muscles, and in the lumbosacral region, they will supply the lower limb muscles. So these are for the upper limb and the lower limb muscles. I will repeat again the muscles. The medial one is for neck and trunk muscles. The central one is for diaphragm, the sternocleidomastoid and the trapezius muscle, and the lateral one is for the upper limb and the lower limb muscle. Now, we will discuss some of the groups which are present in the posterior gray column. I have already told you that these groups, they will, out of these groups, there are 4. Out of 4, the 2 will be present in entire spinal cord. I will show you in the diagram. See here, the substantia gelatinosa and the nucleus proprius, they will present in the entire spinal cord, but the nucleus dorsalis and the visceral afferent nucleus will be present in some part of the spinal cord. So the substantia gelatinosa first, it is the group which is present at the apex of the posterior gray column throughout the length of spinal cord. So what is important? First of all, you have to remember the name, then you have to remember the location and the whole extent or which area of the spinal cord in which that group is present. It is largely composed of the Golgi type 2 neurons, which are very short neurons, and they will receive the afferent fibers concerned concerned with the pain, temperature and touch from the posterior root. This is very, very important. The anterior one, the anterior gray column was for the muscles. See here, this was for the muscles or motor area or efferent area. Now we are discussing the posterior gray column. This is the afferent info there. It is carrying the afferent information or the sensory information. So the substantia gelatinosa is carrying the afferent sensation of the pain, temperature and touch. Furthermore, it is also receiving some of the descending fibers from the supraspinal level. So important thing is it is carrying the fibers or receiving the afferent fibers with pain, temperature and touch. Now the second nucleus, which is nucleus proprius, it is also present in the entire length of the spinal cord. It is anterior to the substantia gelatinosa. The main function of this nucleus is to receive fibers from the posterior white column that are associated with the senses of the position and movement. It is called as proprioception, two-point discrimination and vibration. It consists of the second order sensory neurons whose axon form the lateral spinothalamic tract. I will describe the lateral spinothalamic tract in the white matter. What you have to learn in this slide, that number 2 nucleus is nucleus proprius. What is important point, that it is present in whole of the spinal cord. Number 3, it is anterior to the substantia gelatinosa. Number 4, it is receiving fibers for the position and movement, which is named as proprioception, and two-point discrimination and vibration. So in the diagram, I will show you that, see here, this is substantia gelatinosa present in whole of the spinal cord. This is nucleus proprius present in whole of the spinal cord. The substantia gelatinosa is receiving the fibers for pain and temperature, and the nucleus proprius is receiving the fibers for touch, two-point discrimination, position and movement, which is named as proprioception, and vibration also. Now the third nucleus, which is nucleus dorsalis, which is also named as Clark's column. This is a group of nerve cell fibers which are present at the base of the posterior gray column, that is in front of the substantia gelatinosa and the nucleus proprius. But this nucleus is not present in entire spinal cord. It is present in C8 to L4. So it will extend from 8th cervical segment caudally to 3rd or 4th lumbar segment, C8 to L4. It is responsible for carrying the fibers from the neuromuscular spindles and the tendon spindles, that is the proprioceptive endings. But the axons, the efferents of this nucleus will form the posterior spinocerebellar tract. This is for unconscious proprioception. The proprioception endings are present, but they are unconscious. The previous one, the nucleus proprius, will carrying the position and movement fibers, the proprioception fibers, but the difference is that they are carrying the conscious proprioception, but the nucleus dorsalis, unconscious proprioception, will be carried by the nucleus dorsalis. Now the fourth nucleus, which is the visceral afferent nucleus, it is a group of nerve cells of medium size. They are situated lateral to the nucleus dorsalis at the base of the posterior gray column. It is also extending from the T1 to L3. That is not present in entire spinal cord. It is only present in T1 to L3, and they are associated with receiving visceral afferent information. See here in this diagram, this is the cervical segment, third cervical segment. This is H-shaped pillar. This is central canal with the commissures around it. This is anterior gray column. In anterior gray column, we will have the medial group. We will have the phrenic nucleus in the center, and we have the accessory nucleus in the center. Okay, and then this is the anterior gray column. In the posterior gray column, we will have the substantia gelatinosa, and we will have the nucleus proprius. Same is here in sixth cervical segment. There will be medial group, and then there will be phrenic nucleus and the accessory nucleus also, which will be present here. Then in the posterior gray column, there is substantia gelatinosa and the nucleus proprius. In the lateral gray column, in the anterior gray column of the lateral group, there will be muscles innervating the upper limb. Muscles are innervated by this segment or by this nucleus. So here the lateral gray column or lateral nucleus of the anterior gray column is also present. In the thoracic one, we have a very small gray matter or very small anterior gray column, because here only the medial group is present. See here, this is the medial group which is present here for the trunk muscles. This is posterior gray column, but here the substantia gelatinosa and the nucleus proprius and dorsalis, they are also present. In the lumbar region, there is a huge amount of the gray matter, because here the medial group is present for the innervation of trunk muscles. Then there is the lateral group is also present for the innervation of the lower limb muscles. In the posterior gray column, we will have the substantia gelatinosa and the nucleus proprius and the nucleus dorsalis along with the visceral afferent nucleus. Now the lateral group, which is the last group, the intermediolateral group of the cells forms the small lateral gray column. It extends from first thoracic to second or third lumbar T1 to L3 region of the spinal cord. They are relatively small and they will give rise to preganglionic sympathetic fibers. But this intermediolateral group of the cells is also present in second, third and fourth sacral segment, that is S2 to S4, and here the function of this intermediolateral group of cells is preganglionic parasympathetic fibers. So what you have to learn, the intermediolateral group of cells, it will be present in T1 to L3 for sympathetic fibers and S1 to S4 for parasympathetic fibers. These are the diagrams for all levels of the spinal cord in which you can learn the gray matter. See here, this is medial group, this is central group, and this is lateral group. This is the anterior gray column. The medial group is for neck and trunk muscles. The central group is for the phrenic part, the diaphragm part, the accessory part, which will be for the sternocleidomastoid and the trapezius muscle, and there will be lumbosacral nucleus. Then there is one lumbosacral or lateral. In the lateral part there is cervical and lumbosacral nuclei which are present, which are for the innervation of the upper limb and the lower limb muscles. In the intermediate part we will have the two types of nucleus, one which are present at the region of thoracic and lumbar, and one which are present in the S2, S3 and S4. The previous one is for the sympathetic fibers and the later one is for the parasympathetic fibers. This is posterior gray column. Here we can see three nuclei. One is substantia gelatinosa, one is nucleus proprius, and one is nucleus dorsalis. And the fourth one is visceral afferent nucleus. The other scheme to learn this gray column is the lamina. These are the layers. They are lamina. This is lamina 1, lamina 2. In the lamina 2, substantia gelatinosa is included. Then there is lamina 3 and lamina 4, 5, 6. This is 7. This one is 8, 1. This is 9 and this is 10. So this is another scheme in which we can learn the anterior and the middle and the posterior gray column of the spinal cord. This is a chart in which the names of the nuclei in the gray column, their extent in the spinal cord and their functions are written. From here you can remember each and everything and revise all nuclei. These are nuclei which are present in the posterior gray column. These are two nuclei which are present for the preganglionic sympathetic and preganglionic parasympathetic fibers which are present in the middle part, and then these are the groups which are present in the anterior gray column for neck and trunk muscles, for diaphragm, for trapezius and sternocleidomastoid, and for the upper limb and the lower limb muscles. These are the lamina. This is 1, 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. So these are the areas which are included in which lamina. So you can learn by lamina also. You can learn by the name of the nuclei also. See here, this is central canal of the spinal cord. The central canal is continuous superiorly with the fourth ventricle which is present in the behind the medulla oblongata and in front of the cerebellum. Inferiorly it is continuous up till the conus medullaris. In the conus medullaris it expands into the terminal ventricle. See here, there will be one fusiform terminal ventricle and which will be terminating in the filum terminale. It is filled with the cerebrospinal fluid and it is lined by ciliated columnar epithelium which is named as ependyma. Thus the central canal is closed inferiorly because it is ending in the terminal ventricle, but it is open superiorly because it is continuous with the fourth ventricle. This is the formation of the spinal nerve. How the spinal nerve is formed. See here, this is gray matter, this is posterior gray column, this is anterior gray column, this is ventral motor root, efferent, motor, anterior and ventral. And this one is posterior root which is dorsal nerve root, and it is also sensory and afferent nerve root only. This is the dorsal root ganglion which is also named as posterior root ganglion or the spinal ganglion. These two roots, they will join together to form a nerve which is named as spinal nerve. This is a mixed nerve. It will give origin to two rami which are ventral rami and ventral ramus and dorsal ramus, and these rami, they are mixed. So you can learn from here the ventral root is motor, the dorsal root is sensory. They will join together to form the mixed spinal nerve. The mixed spinal nerve will give origin to two rami. The ventral ramus is also mixed and the dorsal ramus is also mixed. The ventral ramus will supply all muscles of the anterior part of the body and the dorsal ramus will supply the muscles and the skin of the posterior part or the back of the body. This is a chart in which you can learn the relation between the vertebral level and the spinal segments. See here, this is the vertebral level. For example, at C1 to C4, which spinal nerve is present? The same spinal nerve will be present. For example, C3 overlies the third cervical segment. Okay, or C3 spinal nerve will overlie the third cervical segment. But in the lower cervical part, C5, C6 and C7, we have to add 1 to the number of the vertebra to get the underlying spinal segment. For example, if there is C5 cervical vertebra or C5 vertebra, then there will be C6 spinal nerve. C7 vertebra, so there will be C8 or 8th cervical nerve. Similarly, in upper thoracic, in cervical part we have to add 1. In upper thoracic we have to add 2. For example, in T1, if there is first thoracic vertebra but the spinal nerve will be third thoracic nerve. In lower thoracic one, in T7 to T9, we have to add 3 to the number of the vertebra to get the underlying spinal segment. For example, if there is T9th spine, it is overlying the 12th thoracic segment. So this chart is also very important. I hope you have understood the internal structure of the spinal cord and the gray matter of the spinal cord. In the next lecture, we will discuss the white matter of the spinal cord. Thank you.